Now, 6 months into Donald Trump's deeply unpopular war in Iran, which he promised would last weeks, we are hearing from the families of U.S. sailors and Marines. Those family members are outraged by the horrific conditions on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. They describe long workdays, moldy showers, food shortages, and sailors running out of toothpaste, deodorant, and soap. They say their loved ones, our service members, are so exhausted after 9 months at sea, fighting a war with no end in sight, that they fear it could lead to deadly mistakes. Here's how one mom describes her own outrage and the conditions she learned from her son over email.
Food obviously has been scarce. All he's really told me is there's a time where he was only eating half a cup of rice and 2 tortillas. The morale is bad. You're not being able to shower. They don't have toiletries. They're having to share stuff. They're exhausted. Trump doesn't want the bad publicity. He knows that you can't tell me he does not know what's going on over there. You cannot tell me that he does not know that they don't have food. He knows. He knows. Pete Hegseth. Send Pete Hegseth over there. Then you come tell us that everything is okay. Because what we're hearing from our children or our spouses or whomever is not that.
I'm going to bring into our coverage Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who broke this story. She's also a former officer in the Navy. This is deeply disturbing, and I know you talked to more than a dozen family members. Take us through what you're reporting.
Yeah, that's right, Nicole. Well, there are about 5,000 sailors and Marines who are on that aircraft carrier, the Lincoln, and they just broke a record that nobody in the Navy ever wants to break, and that's the most number of continuous days at sea. They left San Diego, their home port, in November. They briefly stopped in Guam in December, and then they didn't make another port call until they went to Oman just a few weeks ago in early July. Many of these sailors and Marines are working 12 to 14-hour shifts, and depending on their jobs, they're not getting a day off. And when you talk about the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, that's one of the most dangerous places in the military, whether or not you're at war. You have these really fast-paced aircraft that are launching and landing on that flight deck. You have bombs, munitions, and weapons that are being moved around at a very fast pace. And you have these sailors and Marines that are being exposed to extremely loud noises for sustained periods of time that can really lead to long-term injuries like hearing loss. So really, what these families are telling me is that when you couple the exhaustion with the low morale that's a result of the fact that they just learned that their deployment was extended for a second time, they're concerned that this could lead to accidents that could potentially turn deadly. And then on top of that, the conditions that you just talked about, they're telling me that the sailors and the Marines can't take hot showers, that the toilets are non-operational, that for weeks at a time there are no access to working laundry facilities, and that they're having to stand in lines to get into the ship's store for 1 to 2 hours. And when they get there, there are no basic hygiene items like toothpaste, deodorant, or soap. And so really their frustration here is that they keep hearing from lawmakers and on the media these questions about our stockpiles of munitions and weapons and $67 billion that Secretary Hegseth is asking for the DOD. And they want their loved ones to be part of this conversation as well.
Let me play, Priya, your interview with Bonnie York, whose stepson is on the USS Lincoln and who voted for Trump.
Maybe the government could have given us the information we needed to understand what we're doing out there, and for our servicemen and women to say, okay, this is important, this is what we're doing this for. And it's everyone saying, well, they signed up for this, this is what it is. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? They're going to be out there till they complete their mission. What are we completing? What have we completed? I'd like to know.
I mean, this has been part of the political conversation that Marco Rubio and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth have failed to articulate an answer to that Trump voter, that military mom. But I think maybe some people thought that inside the military there was a better understanding. But to hear a mom say, quote, what are we completing is really, really chilling.
Yeah, that's right, Nicole. I mean, all of these sailors and Marines know what they signed up for. They know that, the military isn't, they weren't going to go on a luxury cruise or something like that. They know they're at war. But I think what's really concerning to them is they want to have a clear mission. They want to complete that mission, and they want there to be an end goal. And really, none of the families feel like that has been clearly articulated to them. And they feel like there's just a lack of transparency with this administration about what the purpose of this war is and when they get to come home.
Priya Sridhar, thank you so much. It's incredible reporting. Thank you for bringing it to us. I want to bring into our coverage Democratic Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado. He served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's a member of the House Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. Tom is still with us. Congressman, your thoughts?
Nicole, there's really 2 big things going on here. The first is Donald Trump's general disdain for anyone in public service, anyone who's committed to something bigger than themselves. And in particular for Donald Trump, our service members, who he has a particular disdain for. He's called them suckers and losers. He says he likes people who don't get caught, don't get captured by the enemy. This is a man who can't wrap his brain around the very notion that people would serve, they would sacrifice, they would give something beyond themselves. He cannot comprehend that thought. So that's the first piece. The second is, this is what happens when you stumble into, or when you enter into, they didn't stumble into it, he chose this war, without a plan. No plan, no strategy, no idea for how they were going to rotate ships through the region, how they were going to rotate aircraft carriers and fighter wings. There is no plan, and now we see the results of that. Our service members are suffering. We don't have adequate supplies to defend the airspace around our bases. The USS Abraham Lincoln, which is one of several large ships in the region, is now on its 9th month at sea. 5 of those months have been engaged in 5 months of combat operations. And the strain on our service members and their families is just building week by week.
Welcome back. Just about the bottom of the hour. So we've got some new reporting first here on MS Now about the brutally demanding conditions that service members are facing overseas as we wait for some resolution to the war with Iran. MS Now spoke with a dozen family members and sailors and Marines aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, who say they're extremely concerned about the morale, safety, and conditions on that ship. The 5,000-person crew has been at sea for 9 straight months and engaged in combat operations since the beginning of the war against Iran, all the way back in February. Many family members describe their kids or spouses telling them about non-operational toilets, moldy showers, laundry facilities that were broken for weeks, and extended periods with no hot water for showering. The families say their loved ones have described food shortages and standing in line at the ship's store for an hour or more, even while it often lacks basic supplies like toothpaste, soap, and deodorant. Let's bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who broke that story. Former acting Army Secretary Patrick Murphy also back with us. Priya, it's a great story. People think about service members, in this case sailors, in a combat zone. They, of course, think about the dangers the enemy may pose. They perhaps think less about just the conditions they have to live with each and every day, sounding, from your reporting, downright miserable and at times maybe even dangerous.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, the Lincoln just set a record in the Navy for having the most continuous days at sea, with more than 200 days underway. They left San Diego in November. They had a brief stop in Guam in December, and then they didn't stop for a port call again until early July, just briefly in Oman, where most of the sailors were able to get off the ship, but they had to stay in port. And really what the families were telling me is they're very worried about exhaustion here. Most of their family members are working 12 to 14-hour shifts. They're depending on their job. They're not getting any days off. And when you talk about a flight deck on an aircraft carrier, this is one of the most dangerous places in the military. You're having high-speed aircraft taking off and landing. You have munitions, weapons, and bombs being moved around at a very fast pace. And the service members are also being exposed to, really loud noises for a sustained period of time, which can really lead to long-term injuries like hearing loss. So when you're talking about exhaustion, when you're talking about low morale, because now this deployment has been extended for a second time and there's no end in sight, they're worried that those things could lead to accidents that could potentially even be deadly. I want you to take a listen to what some of them told me.
They didn't choose to be there. They volunteered to be there. They're willing to be there, and they're doing their best. So they want our support. And part of that support means we have to have the tools to do our job. That means the fuel. That means the food, right? That means the food. That means the toothpaste and the deodorant. That means all of it, right? Now,
I don't think it's the ship is the issue. I think it's our president, it's our government that's not helping the morale. I think the ship is doing what they can do with what they're given. But I think our government needs to be doing more for our military that's sitting over there.
And so, you're hearing from them about exhaustion, but they're saying that, even at the end of their shifts, the fact that these sailors and Marines can't take showers, they can't wash their uniforms. I had some family members tell me that they believe that prisoners and inmates in jail are treated with more dignity and respect than our service members.
So, Patrick, let's get your take on this. What does this tell you about Pete Hegseth's military?
Listen, we're stretched pretty thin, and it's not just. Priya did a great job in his reporting, Jonathan. The one point she made in her article, which I like to highlight, there's over 10,000 shorties off the USS Lincoln. In the Pentagon, we used to say, amateurs talk strategy, experts talk logistics. The USS Lincoln is the logistics machine there in the Middle East, pushing out these sorties every day. And it is a very dangerous, job. And these are the ultimate warriors, whether you're a sailor or a soldier. The fact is that you are doing really tough jobs. And so my heart and thoughts and prayers are going out to these sailors.
This is terrible for Trump. This is awful. And I know he's going to want Pete Hegseth's head for this. Right? He's in a firing mood right now. He's talking about Ken and Piro. He's recently fired Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard, Kirsty Noem. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, right? And he takes out people for a few reasons. One, they fail. They do their job, right? They do their job in a way that actually hurts Trump. Like, for example, Judge Janine dropping that case because she doesn't have the evidence, which is what a ethical prosecutor does. I'm not saying she is ethical, but she had a moment of rare accidental positive ethics, and she might get fired for that. You get fired when you make the story about yourself and you try to steal the spotlight, which is what happened to Kristi Noem, right? She tried to make herself the star of Trump's deportation efforts rather than Trump himself, and she got fired for that. Or you do something so egregious that somebody has to get fired, and whether or not you actually did it, if you were blame adjacent enough, you're going to get fired. Although, to be clear, this is Pete Hegseth's responsibility. And this is MAGA, because MAGA is an anti-worker movement. It pretends to be pro-blue collar or whatever, but the Republican Party is an anti-union, anti-worker party. And I know soldiers can't unionize, and they're not traditionally seen as workers in the way that like a factory worker is, but like soldiers have working conditions. They have working conditions. And if those conditions are bad, it leads to a lack of safety and a lack of dignity. And if soldiers have to, in addition, worry about being shot at and being killed in battle, which is a worry they have at least from time to time, and then they also have to worry about not getting food, not getting adequate shelter, not getting toothpaste, the food they get being moldy. If there was one piece of evidence that Trump and Hegseth don't give a damn about the men and women in uniform,